Get started. Okay. So everyone should be able to see that.
We do.
Okay, great. I can't see you, so I'm just going to go ahead. Good morning, everyone. I am Chris Filler from Ocali, and I'm going to talk, continuing the conversation this month about sensory sensitive considerations for supports for the home. And so just to start with, to help you kind of think about what is the goal of thinking about supports in the home. The goal is, when you're in the home, is thinking about how do we modify, create, organize, provide access to experiences, activities, and environments that will optimize that sensory processing, sensory regulation. So what that means is that you want to remove the quantity or quality of sensory demands that cause the person to deregulate, and increase those kinds of environments, sensory input that will make that person be able to more efficiently and effectively regulate. And so in order to think about doing that, one of the things that you want to have in your mind is that sensory input can either be calming or alerting. And so calming really means that we're reducing demands, helping the systems tolerate and respond, reducing the agitation, inviting more of those cognitive responses rather than the emotional responses that might lead down a road of escalation. And it gives more opportunity oftentimes for us to engage in other interventions. The alerting kind of input grabs your sensory system's attention, and it allows you to oftentimes attend more to the environment. The key, though, is it needs to be that just right amount, so you're not overstimulating or providing too much demand. So oftentimes we're really erring on, I don't know if erring is the right word, but we're really going on the side of looking to calm that nervous system. I wanted to remind you that there was on May 6th a didactic by Abigail Muniz, and she did an overview of the sensory systems. It's on YouTube. If you didn't see it, I encourage you to go back and review it. It gives you a good foundation for the information going forward. So I'm going to go through the systems and talk a little bit about calming and alerting, and then give some interventions to think about for the home. So the first is the visual system. Calming input is like the blues, the greens, the grays, earth tones, the visual organization, indirect lighting, while alerting input is that bright flashing lights, reds, oranges, yellows, actually visual clutter. And think about it. We use this for police lights and sirens, and thinking about fast food restaurants. They're always in reds and oranges to keep you alert in and out quickly. So what do we think about for visual considerations in the home? Thinking about the walls and the colors, blues and greens and earth tones. You may want to think about using indirect lighting rather than overhead lighting, dimmer switches, thinking about the kind of bulbs that you would use, and removing those flickering bulbs that are in the way. Glare is something you need to think about too. People that are sensitive could really be sensitive to the glares on screens, tablets, computers, as well as surfaces like floors and walls, countertops, cabinets, even thinking about like the gloss or the shine or the wax that you use. You really want to avoid those if possible. On windows, think about film coverings. Of course, there's curtains, but what about just the coverings that you can put on windows that have different levels of opacity and can block some of that sun or the glare. Of course, room darkening shades. Other things you can think about are locations in the room. Think about where that youth plays, or where that youth does their homework, or just wants to be. If they're sensitive, be careful about facing the windows or bright lights. And if someone really wants to wear sunglasses or caps with little brims inside, that may be very helpful. One of the things that we don't always think about is visual organization. Clutter can be very overwhelming, and it doesn't help someone really engage in trying to initiate engaging in play or materials or other things. So you want to think about, how do we store things? How do we organize things on shelves? Predictable and well-placed visual supports are incredibly important. Visual supports that are not predictable or not used well or all cluttered can be confusing and not useful. So visual, that's something to think about. Quickly, we'll just talk about the auditory system. Calming input is that predictable pattern, long duration, low volume, familiar input, while the alerting is irregular, fast, something that you wouldn't necessarily think of. And so in the environment in the home, we typically look to reduce a lot of that auditory input. Many people that are sensory sensitive, this is one of the areas they very much talk about being distracting. So just structurally, carpets and rugs, that can really dampen hardwood floors or tile floors. Unfortunately, sometimes we want to put in hardwood and tile because they're easier to clean, but they also give a lot of that auditory feedback. You can do soundproofing with acrylic window inserts, wall panels and floor tiles that absorb. There's even acoustic caulk that will seal gaps in windows and doors, and it blocks air, and air is what transmits the sound. And of course, heavy curtains, anything to sort of dampen it. Be careful with lighting that hums. I talk about house manners. I don't know if it's manners, rules, whatever, but just the people in the home. Sit back and just listen sometimes to all of the different talking and conversation and overlaps each other. One person giving direction and instruction versus 20 people trying to tell that youth what to do, when to do it. Really, that is part of that auditory sensitivity that we can help control. White noise machines, music with earbuds, noise canceling headphones, not only have them available, but make them readily available, maybe putting them on hooks where people can get them quickly, or having visual support so they can be requested quickly. And then a person needs to have some priming. If you know it's going to get loud, if you know people are coming home and it's going to get loud and you want to give them the opportunity to move out of that main area, giving people that kind of opportunity also helps. And things like allowing people to sort of understand that they have some control, like having the remote to be able to turn down the volume. Those kinds of things can help people get less excited or less upset because they have some control. Olfactory, now that's our sense of smell. This is a whole system now. You think about all of the products that are out now that are now being promoted. It's a huge business. And so it is something we can very much think about and should think about in the home in terms of calming scents like vanilla, lavender, those natural scents or no scent, versus things like peppermint or menthol or eucalyptus. So what we want to think about here is some of the things that we use in the home for cleaning products. And laundry detergents. Think about how we use the low odor or no odor cleaning products. Unless it's something that somebody really enjoys and is not agitated by, we may want to be careful with those. You also want to think about paints and varnishes. You can use low odor paints and varnishes and building materials. If you don't, you have to think about having ample time for that odor to get out of the house before you bring people into it. Air filters can be helpful, but you want to make sure that you have the right type that absorbs odors, because not all of them do. Lotions and bath washes, soaps, candles, all these things, it's kind of common sense. Was that a pun? Common sense? Calming scents or no scent, you may want to consider. So avoid also thinking about those that live in the home. Perfumes and lotions may smell really good to us, but they can be incredibly overwhelming to someone that's sensitive. So that goes along with air fresheners. Some of us really like those and want to use those, but they can also be very irritating if you're sensitive. And thinking about where someone spends their time, especially if they're playing or trying to focus on work, schoolwork, or just trying to calm. If it's in an area where there are a lot of cooking smells or cleaning smells and they're sensitive, that's something that you want to be aware of. All right, the tactile system, really important. Calming input to the tactile system is that deep pressure touch, warmth is calming, while alerting is light touch, cold, again, kind of common sense. But just a note, if someone is sensitive, very sensitive, any kind of touch can be alerting and disturbing even for them. So if we are dealing with someone that has a lot of sensitivity to touch, you're going to want to pay attention to this kind of area. One thing is that you will want to provide personal space and in a safe space, safe location, safely monitored, that has lots of things that are calming, like pillows and blankets, even weighted blankets, small tent that a child that might need a little personal space could get into. It needs to be in a place that gives them enough space away, but also they don't have to navigate to another side of the house, downstairs, upstairs, whatever, because transitions are tough. And if it's a time where they're having a tough time, asking them to transition may not be a good idea. So really thinking about the location. Defined space around the house, I think, is really nice. Having people have access to things like overstuffed chairs and beanbag chairs, lounge chairs, instead of couches. Couches don't have the kind of defined space that sometimes people are looking for. And so if you are very sensitive to touch, you may want some of those other kinds of areas. And when you have those locations, think about also providing those heavy cushions and blankets, those kinds of things that can really give some of that nice heavy, pleasing pressure. I think furniture arrangement's really important to think about. People that are sensitive to touch need to know that if they need to move away from what's going on, they need to have a clear escape route. So thinking about where they are placed, where they're doing their work, where they're playing, that they are able to see, if I need to move out, I can move out. No one is going to stop me. I don't have people constantly passing by me that might be touching or entering my space. This can be something that will actually trigger a fight or flight type of response if somebody thinks or feels like that they are in danger of having somebody enter their space. So arrangements in the home of their furniture can be very important. In the bedroom, again, sort of those bed tents sometimes can be helpful. And also thinking about the type of bedding, the softness of the sheets, the weight of the blankets. Again, if you are very sensitive, some of those more scratchy kinds of materials that you and I may not be bothered by, someone that is very sensitive could be. Now, access to water and water play could be really lovely for the tactile system, like a pool or a tub, but I want to stress, please, please, please be extremely cautious about safety if you're looking at this. We hear too often children and young adults that have these kinds of desires to engage into like pools and tubs and that type of thing, have these kinds of sensory needs being drawn into pools and rivers and whatnot and drowning because they just have no sense of how dangerous it could be. So want to be very careful there, including high temperature limits on showers. And speaking of showers, think about the kind of spray that a shower head has. Some of them are very almost like little needly things. Thinking about removable shower heads that you can have more control over, and even your toilet seats, cushions rather than hard. So moving on to the gustatory system, I'm kind of just going through this very quickly because I know we have limited time, but you can always look back and spend a little time going through a little bit slower time. Calming for the gustatory system is that warm, smooth, sweet taste, but alerting is cold, sour, spicy, really, again, common sense there. And here, when we think about in the home, one of the things that I think is really important is thinking about the eating environment. You want to make sure that this is a time where you're lowering the demands as much as possible to the other aspects of the sensory system. So the auditory, visual, spatial environments, that you want to make sure that those are low demand so that the person can really concentrate on the sensory demands of eating, which can be very overwhelming. And oftentimes there are a lot of social demands during that time. The person may actually get most of their nutrition not at the typical meal time, but maybe in small frequent meals. If you're really struggling in this area, however, I would encourage you to get some professional advice from a nutritionist or an occupational therapist that could really help you in this area. There are all kinds of different types of taste. And so you can see listed here, there are just a number of areas that you may want to allow the person to explore to see what do they really like? What are they drawn to? What don't they like? And remember, there's a close relationship between taste and smell. And also there are a lot of tactile sensitivities in the mouth. So as you are exploring this area, keep in mind, it may not just be taste, it could be odor and it could be tactile. The vestibular system, again, another one that you have to think of a little carefully in the home. So calming input is slow, steady, rhythmic, almost like think of a rocking chair. That's a very calming kind of movement, whereas fast, irregular spinning, like on a swing that's going in a rotary fashion, very alerting. So in the environment, this is very broad, but you want to make sure that you can facilitate opportunities for movement both inside and outside. And so think about the arrangement of furniture again. Can it give you a walking, pacing? Many people want to pace and walk. And so will the house and the arrangement be able to facilitate that? Think about swings inside and out, trampolines, rockers, gliders, and activities like dancing and yoga and twister game, running, biking, things like that could be part of the regular schedule in the home, as well as wiggle seats and cushions at dinner time can be really helpful. One of the things you don't want to do, though, and this is incredibly important, is never, ever impose that aggressive swinging or spinning. That is something that can be very alerting and can cause a lot of negative reactions that last really for a long period of time. That is something that an occupational therapist only should engage in. So think about more of that controlled movement. Proprioceptive system is in general a very organizing system, gives you a lot of awareness, and it is activated by compressions to joints and muscles. And so giving access to a lot of proprioceptive input in the home environment can be extremely helpful for the person. So it's things like running, jumping, pushing, pulling, what we call heavy work. So think about the routines in the home. Think about what you would have people do in terms of carrying in groceries, taking trash out, stretching to put things up and down. Think about a designated exercise space in the house as well as outside of the house. And access to those weighted blankets and pillows, those kinds of therapeutic types of things, having those in the home as well. Needing to also understand that some people really need to feel grounded. They like they don't have a good proprioceptive input. And so thinking about where if seating doesn't allow someone to have their feet firmly on the floor, think about footstools, that type of thing that a person can have. So this is just a brief summary of some of the highlights. Lighting, odors, or you need to think about, selective with your colors, sound reduction, organization, space, escape areas, sensory play, and mealtime. These are some of the highlighted areas to think about as you go through. And just a few resources here, including the didactic that you may want to consider. So thank you very much. I hope that some of this can be of help.